All right, with all due respect, good evening. Tonight, we want to discuss a heavy topic, a topic that we have to continually keep on discussing, the question of media and media space, media independence, media bias, media business, and journalism as a whole, right? There's a new administration, and this is predicated from what the last election, 2022, as you'd have known, the Kenya Kwanza campaign characterized the media as a team against the Kenya Kwanza campaign. That had implications and repercussions to what happens next. The media business, as you all know, has been going through tumultuous times. In studio, I'm joined by three gentlemen to go over and discuss these questions in great detail. I do have Victor Bwire, who's the Director of Media Training and Development at the Media Council of Kenya. Karibu sana. I also do have William Olojanak, Media and Communication Consultant. Karibu sana. And I also do have Patrick Gadara, who's a Curator-in-Chief at The Elephant. Welcome.
Nice to be here.
All right. Gentlemen, let's start with the elephant in the room, the obvious question that the media was absolutely biased. And based on that, we find ourselves in this position that we're in today, that there's a new government, and the new government, quote unquote, wasn't supported by the media. In fact, 2 weeks ago, I think the Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua was quoted in the media, and he spoke this in church, where he said that you are against us. Now you should keep quiet and shut up as we show you how to run government. Gadara, let's start with you.
Well, I didn't particularly buy the media was against a Ruto narrative. I mean, I know there were certain shenanigans. I think the media didn't do itself many favors during the campaigns, especially if you look during the debate. I mean, the launch of the manifestos. You know, I think over there were games being played by the stations. But I still think on the main, they were covered just like everybody else. And even if there was bias, even if we accept that there was bias, that it doesn't then follow that once you're in government, then you can tell people to shut up. You know, government is not like sort of your personal thing. You know, it's a public trust, and you should expect that the people, even if they didn't like you coming in, are going to be the people holding you to account. In the same way, yeah, in the same way, he's been welcoming, or quote unquote, the opposition to to hold the government to account. Why would he then resist it from the media? He should similarly welcome it, you know, rather than whine about what happened during the campaigns.
Yeah, William, for you, it's pretty much the same question, and the reason I think we keep on asking this is because it keeps on coming back over and over again, right? Where should we be? Where should the media be in this question of covering the elections that have just ended, the questions of bias or no bias? Where should the media be right now?
I think one of the things that probably we need to agree on is that we have no change of regime. The regime succeeded itself. Okay. Yeah. So from 2013, you know, we had the Ruto regime, and their attitude towards the media was pretty the same thing. Only that perhaps it is louder now than it was. You know, we have the famous, statement from the retired president, Uhuru Kenyatta, saying, "Gazeti ni ya kufunga nyama." And at that time he said it was his deputy who was reading newspapers for him and saying a few things, okay? Then after that, they kind of tolerated the media bit. But now, of course, campaign time is difficult, and we know the environment, how it was. So it means that Ruto was part of the regime that was essentially from the ICC days, and they're thinking that the media joined sections of the civil society in portraying them negatively. So from 2013 up to now, we won't say that there has been any change. Of course, we have a slight change because Uhuru is out, but the environment remains the same.
It's pretty much the same.
It's the same because his deputy who has succeeded him. And the difference now is that within the deputies, within the president's corner now, are perhaps many more less progressive people than probably what we had, earlier on. Not that Uhuru had any progressive, people at all, but there were people there who were perhaps more tolerant. But here, if you hear this speech by the deputy and others, and some will come out. You will probably begin to see that the anger, with the media was more or less like the anger with their opponents. So where we are now, in fact, we'd probably say there have been arguments about whether or not the media ought to be objective. The media shouldn't be objective. Even here where we are. No, what does that mean?
Yes.
Here we are.
Balance.
We are
fairness.
Fair.
Yes.
For me, I argue about the media being fair.
Yeah.
But the very idea that editors make choices about what to publish or not to publish, the opinions that we are volunteering here, mean that we have certain opinions, we are volunteering certain, so we can't bias. Even my own way of looking at how the regime was
it comes from a certain viewpoint.
Yeah. So essentially then would say that the media must navigate this carefully, but as my colleague here says, I think the media is an important space as a watchdog, and therefore it must be tolerated by those who are volunteered to be in authority.
If we're not tolerated, the media is not tolerated, and they would sort of push back and say we are doing well without you. We have Facebook, we have Twitter, we have bloggers. We then don't need the media. And like you said, they've proved since 2013 the Kenyatta theme or Jubilee theme, which has succeeded, is we actually don't need the media. We've done it without the media.
I'm writing that's not the case. Media does not need to be tolerated. Some of these things are fought for, So for media to expect that they will be tolerated to do their work is also to expect too much. Just do your work. Those who like you, those who hate you, we don't come here to hate, to love each other. Let just people do their work. And if media can stick to the work they do, the fourth estate as it were, then these tensions are there. I mean, tension between media state tensions are global, and they have been there for those years. So we don't expect any favor. Let's just people do their work, and where they're harassed, we deal with. I mean, there are laws to deal with that, and where people are doing the right job and the right work, they just do their work. But the thinking that we'll expect that the government will say, now we welcome media, we'll be friends. I don't think that will be there. Let's just people do their work. And from what I'm seeing, obviously, like colleagues said, bias comes from so many other things, where you went to school, which tribe you come from, culture. Sometimes they influence how you look at things, and it might not necessarily be a media bias, but sometimes even get keeping at your individual level. That when I go to the field, when my editor asks me, sometimes I look at things the way I'm a Luya and how we perceive some of those things. So sometimes it's not be a systematic decision to be biased, but sometimes are purely individual. Sometimes how, if I grew up as a poor person in Budalangi, then I look at all rich people as very poor, they are responsible for my poverty, so I hate them. So some of those things are not, but and many times we say this, some of these things, you might get more media coverage, not because media likes you, but because you have a solid, comprehensive media plan. So it has gotten, sometimes it's purely activities. We came here, and for a reason we had to see it because Professor Mago has died. So we sometimes know that you like him, but it's a news that has happened. So sometimes people, there's nowhere where people see it. Gadara is a curator, you are an editor here, and decide we will do this to government. Sometimes it's very simultaneous thing that's happened, and people think that people are favored. But many times it's not the case, and people must move away from thinking that the media is, I don't think, because some of those people in the government, you are saying, hate media, own media. So if they hated the media, they will not be investing in media. So that thing will go. Look at even the current sort of absorption. How many journalists and media people have been absorbed in this? And you start noticing it's not that. So again, and this is a discussion we've had, sometimes we get to mix editorial things and business things, and we start mixing. That if then, for example, if it is supposed to be government or media houses, then they hate journalists. But those things are not related. So to me, where I see it is that even at any time, journalists must just push for their space. There are laws to protect them, and for the constitution to accept that there's journalism protection, they anticipated that those tensions are there, and there's a way of dealing with them. So I don't expect any time where we'll be told that government now is very good, media come, we work together. Those things are not there. So to me, the bigger piece we are seeing is the use of public interest journalism. Are we losing it? Are we still there? A bit of the in-depth but when also people start treating heavy things lightly, then that's thinking of the deputy president thinking, and others will be there. But and it's not new. Havengo Kondo were there. They were used to threaten journalists, and life continued.
I'll pick up from the point of the public interest journalism, because that's such a central question, and thanks for bringing it. Gadara, there's this thing, this business that demands that you should go for clickable things. So there's click journalism that goes on. And you can see from the numbers, and they tell you, you know, all these blogs that are doing very well, they're doing 1 million views, you're doing 10,000 views. So you're not doing well. There's something with your storytelling that is not important. But talk to me around this question of public interest journalism. What is that?
Well, public interest journalism is basically what it says. It's journalism that's conducted in the interest of the public and not necessarily in the interest of the purveyor of the journalism. So, for example, The Nation is a business, you know, and it, as you said, it will favor stories that will bring audiences that they can then sell to advertisers. But there are many stories out there that you're not going to be able to monetize, you know, but are important to tell, you know. And I think public interest journalism focuses on what is important for the public to know, not what makes money for the corporations.
And who pays for that? Because that's
the question. And I've been saying this for a while. I think the model that we have, where we get private companies to do public interest journalism, is problematic, you know. And I think we need to really rethink that and to ask who pays for it. So take newspapers, for example. On a good day, Nation would be selling what, 40,000, 50,000 papers perhaps, you know, in a population of what, of 50 million people. The vast majority of Kenyans never get to see a newspaper. So when we are mediating our political conversation through the newspapers, who are we talking to? And if we want to expand it so that we include many more people, who pays for that? If you say Nation will pay for it, they're not going to do it. You know, they've got to be able to make money.
They need to pay for
exactly. You know, so the state has to have, I think, a positive role to actually ensure that people can get proper journalism, you know, there. We've got places like KBC, you know, etc., that should be run to provide these sorts of things, you know. But I also think that, given the circumstances that we're in, that there should be a way of financing public interest journalism from the public purse.
Right.
You know, and I think that one of the ways we could do that is to actually take something like the advertising budget of government and understand that that advertising budget, that's not the government's money, that's our money, you know. And if we want to pay for journalism, that's one of the ways we could use it.
You're introducing a very complex thing here, because that advertising budget is the one that is being used, you know. As
well, it's now being used, yeah, exactly, to control press. But I actually truly believe it should be actually independently managed. Shouldn't be managed by politicians, by guys at State House, because when they do, they use it as they're doing it now.
But they have never done it.
You know, so right now, all they're doing is, if you don't
it never happened.
Play ball, you're not paying.
That's never happened.
You know, they brought in, what's that thing called? The government GA, government advertising agency, in essence, to pull together all the advertising and use it as a club.
No.
And say, well, either you run it,
but it has never been used like that.
Well, that's it's been working.
It has
These guys have been complaining how they're not being paid.
No, whatever lies.
Hang on, William. We'll just thematically through this question.
Okay.
Does the public care about public interest journalism, from your experience, truthfully and honestly?
I think they do. You know, I think the public is interested in public interest journalism. I mean, take it from, for example, let us look at the governance and democratic questions around, you know, because there has, for example, under the Kanu regime, a vast majority of Kenyans relied on the media to shape opinion and to say that indeed these are the critical questions about reform. And most of the media moved in that direction. When initially the mainstream media that existed at that time, you know, Standard, the nation of course was on the fringes of saying fear and of moving on, you know. Now, a number of publications that we call alternative media emerged, and many of them were here at Tumaini House, you know. And who was paying for that? The people who are public spirited, Nyamora, Gitobe Manyara, all the other people who are there, or the church Lengo and all the others, bore the cost of doing this, including when, for example, the government would go and raid photo form, you know, or remove them from the streets. So people believe in public interest journalism, because at that time, look, the people said there was need for reform. The people went with this. People would lap up publications that talked about that kind of thing. Now, the difference now is, if we are talking about business, we are talking about people who have retreated, and at some point it was thought that, you know, Kenya is on autopilot. You know, we can move on. There's no Moi went, Kanu went, so things are fine. We are all fine. That is where we have lost it, and therefore, again, during that time, we had certain editors who are committed to the public. Yeah,
but you know, if I may interrupt, I think one of the things to remember that is, even at that time, what we would term as mainstream press, you know, really went to a very small proportion of the population. Yeah. You know, and I think we have to keep in mind, that actually not just everyone, it essentially excluded the vast majority of people. Most people couldn't afford a newspaper till even back then, and they couldn't even access it. I remember the times when I'd go to Narok and to Masai Mara, and you'd have wardens waiting for you over there and asking who's got a newspaper, you know, and they'd confiscate them because they couldn't get them, you know. And that's my point, is if we're to expand beyond Nairobi and a few hubs, you know, and actually go where people are, then you've got to ask, what news do they get? If you've got right now county governments and what happens in counties, but they're being covered from Nairobi by essentially nation whose voice essentially overwhelms everybody else, then what will happen is the guys at the county, their issues are sort of packed on the side. They you know, they're also, everybody is invested in this national conversation, not the one that really matters.
I had to break this, but I need to go for a small commercial break. The small thing of, you know, paying bills. You know, it's important. William Janak and Victor Bure, take national break. When we come back, we get to this the ideological question of journalism and why it's, you know, failing or where it can succeed. You're watching With All Due Respect. Don't go too far.
Kidani Mabati Roofing Tapes. Custom-made roofing has become more popular as it saves you costs on off-cuts and ensuring that all roofing are pre-cut as per your house specifications.
Kidani Mabati, located along the Eastern Bypass, Kamakis, have you in mind with amazing offers. We also have a Lipa Pole Pole option and free delivery countrywide. Call us today on 0708 111 105 or SMS to 24900 to place your order. Tujenge Kenya na Kidani Mabati.
National Cancer Institute of Kenya and partners invites you to join us from 2nd to 4th February at the Kasarani Primary School, where screening will be done and the public will be educated on cancer and its associated risks. The National Cancer Summit will be taking place at the same time from 2nd to 3rd at the Safari Park Hotel, where health experts will show and share best practices. Data Protection Fact Sheet Mandate. E-services provided by the Office of Data Protection Commissioner include file a complaint, register as a data controller or processor, and report a data breach.
Join the ODPC as we commemorate Data Privacy Day on the 27th of January from 8 a.m. at the Kenyatta International Convention Center under the theme Promoting Data Protection in Digitally Transformed Economy.
I looked for another oncologist so he can give you a second opinion. I got you an appointment for tomorrow.
No, wait, Marissa, it's not necessary that we do that. I trust my doctor.
I am the owner. Okay, sir, would you move along now?
You'll have to forgive me if I'm stubborn, but these papers cannot be right.
Why can't they be right?
Because you should know that the owner of this bakery is me.
I'm sorry?
I'm very sorry to tell you this, madam, but I am afraid that you have been swindled.
It had to be you.
All right, with all due respect, welcome back. I do have Victor Bwire, Patrick Gadara, and William Olojanak. And we were discussing that important question of what happens to public interest journalism. I want to bring it now to my friend Victor. Victor, is still to finish this point before we sort of we bring it to a close. The question, if the public is interested on public interest journalism, it's an experiment that goes on, forever. I remember in this place around 2012 or 2013, there was an experiment for a whole 4 months. Don't do anything else, but just cover, public interest, cover, prices of food, agriculture, housing, and that sort of thing. And our ratings tanked. Okay, so you can come up to two options: either we are terrible at it, or the public doesn't care. Okay, and I'll admit both, because Gadara will attack me with one. So please.
But you use a mixture. We must also, because a number of times we are told our media is full of politics. A number of times, but sometimes out of studio, I walk to Ambassador, Garden Square, KICC, and what people are talking is politics. So this accusation that media in Kenya is obsessed with politics, when Kenyans, even we have just finished an election, but you will think we have another election in December again. Everybody's politicking. You remember we started a newspaper called The Leader at Royal Media with Bedan Bugwa, Mutegi Njawa. And at that time, Macharia said we must only focus on development issues. So we are writing about farming and water, and it closed down. I mean, so it might not be either or. Yeah. It might be that how do we package our content, our products, in a way that one carries the other. Because if you looked at, for example, something like the Saturday magazine, at some time the Saturday Nation, the sales were a bit lower. And they introduced this agriculture magazine, that Seed of Gold, in the Saturday Nation. And all of a sudden, gradually, the sales went up. And Nation, we remember NTV had also to start a Seed of Gold, because people are interested in agriculture and other things. But we are not saying it should be started at the expense of this other topic. There's a survey we have done, which we'll be releasing, I think, on 13th of February, World Radio Day. And you start noticing that, in fact, the content people need more, or what people consume more in that study, is not about even the things we talk about. And they are saying the content Kenyans read more is crime, education, it's not even, that's what the study is showing. And that also tells you that sometimes people would want to complain, but even check on your WhatsApp. Most of us belong to WhatsApp groups. You would see an accident, a death is circulated in our WhatsApp group more than even what we would call public interest thing. So that's also something that is unique.
I have a problem with how we draw a line between these politics and these issues, as if our politics have nothing to do with issues.
Some of it have some.
And I think a lot of what we do, and this is why I blame our press, is it presents politics as drama. Basically, as a soap opera.
That's what I was saying.
And I think the question isn't whether or not you should cover politics. I think you should, but it is how you cover it, And
I think that's
what we do is we divorce it from the issues so that we can make it entertainment. Because it is about Ruto versus Raila. That is the thing.
If you look,
it is not about these competing visions. It's not about whether or not these people are being consistent. It's not whether about what's a history and what are the problems that we are trying to solve.
And that's what I was saying. That
is the big issue problem that we have
of public interest. The interest is there, because look at what the government is implementing right now. Away from the big four agenda of the previous government, we are now the 5 pillars, which is still housing and what. But you see, you might think there's a change. If people are doing the politics of development or the political economy of the country, then you'll see a difference. But if it's just about I won, I did not win, you won, I did not win.
But it's still public interest. I mean, I won, I did not win. I mean, the whole question about the hygiene around governance and lack of it, you know, is a public interest issue for me. Until it is sorted out, then people will not shift to other things. So that, like what you are saying, the question is, how do we present this? That would be the question.
But what I'm seeing today, like the case today, Chebukati is saying what happened, the other one is saying what did not happen. So what is the involvement of Kenyans in this thing? What value addition is it giving to Kenyans about you won, I did not win, I was to be kidnapped, I was not kidnapped. So I mean, what are the issues? What are the issues in this thing?
So what the media does in this situation is essentially said he said and he said.
And that's what I was saying.
And that's all it leaves it at. So you're not actually left with, are we actually trying to find out whether these people are telling the truth? We're so invested in the drama of it, you know, of presenting this soap opera. This is today's episode, you know. Chebukati said this.
But there's room for public interest journalism, and people are going to fund that. I mean, there are a lot of people who want public interest journalism, and they can fund it. We have seen people applying for grants and getting for public interest journalism. So there are people who really believe in quality content, and they are there. It's just that we have removed news to look at news as a public. Purely a news for sale, a tool for sale. And every time anybody discusses, we say, who will meet that cost? Who will meet that cost? So that the cost of meeting the cost. Remember, if, like you said, if we are going to run journalism purely as a profit motive and not public interest, it must be a challenge. And somebody raised an issue of we are so still stuck in journalism of what we are looking at the supply side, not looking at the demand, what does the public want. And once we are sure that this is, because how does CSOs run in this country? How do other non-profit organizations run? That if we are giving a product that is good and there's a big demand for it, there's a way of looking of how to meet the costs. But if we are stuck on the cost alone, it's too expensive, then we also lose because, and that's why you remember, William, there's a time when he said, if we start bringing CEOs from Kenya breweries, from Red to run media houses, then they start looking at public news as purely profit. Then we also lose. And we are seeing some of these differences. It's not that I have any person or anything against it, but we are seeing a serious difference between media houses being run by people with some journalism background and journalism knowledge than people who are running this without any because if you bring these companies that will tell you can do a story without a sub-editor because that's a waste of money, a story can come from a correspondent, then it's published directly, then you are meeting the same cost through defamation suits because the quality control is low. So we must have some people who also appreciate that journalism is not purely how you can run, for example, bread, super loaf and something.
Okay, so Chris Kira on Twitter says, media stations can't be independent. They will always support a political side. Years ago, KBC was accused of being pro-state. Years later, it's clear none can be independent. Online media give a chance to everyone to air their content. William, how do you respond to that? Because we hear this all the time.
I mean, of course, there's the thinking that, the mainstream media have some sort of capture, because, I mean, who owns them? Either directly or indirectly. And of course, Internews published a report, some time ago, say factually true, legally untrue. Factually, we know that who owns the media houses and whether it's the previous regime or now, we know through their cronies. Now, ordinarily, because people want a lot more space to express themselves away from the restrictive nature of what has become the mainstream media. That is why those people are saying, the social media and the others offered them space. But of course, as journalists, we would still want to work within what is ethical. So while some people may want something to run with where they just put opinion and so on, I think the media still must remain fairly ethical, even as it struggles with the question around bias and all these other things, or the presentation of, or the focus on profit. I think what we may need to think about, and which we need to interest media owners and managers, you know, is, can we have a balance between public interest and the profits that they want? Okay, because if you operate in an environment where you are not promoting public interest, then eventually you will not survive.
But then they would argue still that someone has to pay for a journalist today to leave the Nation Media Group and go and cover, you know, event X. Someone is meeting that cost. So which comes first?
No, you see now, look, we can't say that the newspapers have been poor. You see that? I mean, many of the newspapers have invested. I mean, would you say Nation is poor or Standard or the others?
They are not.
They are not. Now, is a question, where do they take the money? For example, it is not instant coffee, for example, in terms of getting that news. Can we say now, over the next 5-10 years, with our reserves, with the insurance and so on, and the kind of backup we have? Because you've got to spend money to get that content. So we cannot begin to say, okay, now we have collected enough money here, let's put it aside and struggle with all these people, and then you have people bringing poor quality content.
No,
and you think
I've got. I think there's two issues that we need to pay attention to. Now, first is whether good content will sell. You know, I think it would.
It will sell.
But you've got the other side of that. Question. The other side of that coin is whether people actually have the resources to pay for that good journalism. So if you take, for example, if you want to do an investigative piece that takes 6 months to put together, you know, and a team of 30 or however many people to do it, you know, will your audience be able to afford to pay for that? You know, and I think, which is why I was talking about the figures about how who actually gets to read a newspaper in Kenya, you know, is that the vast majority of guys, if we simply run our media on the basis that only the people who can pay will get the news, very few guys are going to get it, you know, relatively few, you know. So that's why we need to see it as both, I think, a public duty on the part of the media, but also something that the public has to pay for, and the public here being the public collectively, you know. If we just leave it for, it's you know, we're only going to get it from
the market forces.
From private companies.
Yeah.
We're going to end up with what we have now.
One of the things that is not convincing, James, is in many of the mass sackings and what we are saying, the media is not raising the issue that we are unable to send people to get content. They are just saying we have been overpaying people and we must get rid of them. You know, so we did a study actually. The disparities of payment in media houses is just weird. That we have in one company where somebody gets 1.2 million salary per month, and the same company somebody stays for 2 months without a pay. So where is even the morality, even away from laws, of you as a manager earning such an amount with the people who are not paid? You know, so sometimes you also ask yourself that where sometimes the morality in that thing. Two, one of the things that we are raising, and many times raising, where it has been presented that the cost of looking for good content, public content, is a problem, there are people who have filled that gap. Go to South Africa, they have a media loan, they give out. Go to companies like Nation, you have a grant, arrangement with Bill Gates to support your climate change and health. You are not paying for that. So we cannot continue saying there's no money to fund good content and get stuck there. We are just spending so much money on unrelated costs. But on his point is should we think on how the public itself, from the public purse, to have these resources so that it is not segmented as you see
as
in
a
countries,
loan or that
there are countries, and we have tried. If, for example, and people have made obviously a request for a media diversity fund in Kenya, and I'm sure through the processes it might be considered. But we are also looking at in countries like Norway, Sweden, which run a very established media fund, support funds because of public interest. But we have a country here where media companies are run like offshore companies, where they even run through offshore funny names. Some of them never pay taxes. Some of them just they are run like extractive industry. You come, make money, go and buy buy some house in rural, and you don't want to invest. Who will even determine which money goes to which media house? Because those are some of the things that we must also look at the governance issues in the media sector, as we even call for that media diversity fund. So that, because in one of the things you are raising, Bwana Kanyara, is you will see even in the GAA, one person had 8 small companies, and he gets the biggest share of that money. It's not even the media we think is serving public interest. So that if we also don't look at the corporate governance issues in the sector and clean up a few things, even bring a media diversity fund, we tried, I can tell you, we tried to, during COVID, to support a few media houses. At that time, we said, let's support some media houses to give some salary and rent, you know, I mean, airtime to their staff. I can tell you, out of 100 and something media houses that are in our system, when we started releasing this money, we noticed there are only 40 media owners in this country, not 200. The same people who have registered several companies, they have overdrafts, they have, so you drop there some money to help journalists, and the money never goes there. So how will the diversity fund support?
I think, of course, we need transparency around who owns media. We need transparency around to what extent, and I think to what extent ownership then dictates coverage. You know, I think sometimes we tend to make too much of it, but I think it's something we need to look at seriously and have it sort of put out in the open. You know,
it helps because
you know, so then people understand. But I still think in the end, we can't run away from the fact that, so for example, if we take newspapers, print media, for example, it is suffering. It's not just suffering in Kenya, it's suffering
it's
across
global.
It's global, you know. And you find that the newspapers or the outlets that are doing well or that are starting to turn around, people like the New York Times, etc., lots of them are focusing on content. So New York Times, for example, rates an article, you know, as to whether it's good or bad, on whether it actually inspires somebody to subscribe, you know, a subscription model, you know. And that for them is what they focused on, is building up people, you know, a product that people will pay for. Now that is good if you've got a population that can pay for it. You know, well, my thing is, again, when you talk about public interest, don't forget you're not just talking about Nairobi. You're talking about the guy in Turkana. You know,
obviously, that is where I wanted to say something. I mean, look, the consumers of media products are so segmented that I mean, for me, we need to run away from thinking that when we are talking about public interest, then it ought to just be the mainstream media.
Right.
We had a conversation at the boardroom, and I remember you were there with the former ICT minister, you know, Dr. Matiang'i.
Matiang'i, yeah.
And we were even talking about the cases of West Africa. For example, community media in West Africa, in South Africa, and all the others. I mean, some of them are doing fantastic work. And if we are talking about public interest, it's not the Nairobi interest.
Right.
There must be an interest in Turkana. What is the interest of the Turkana? I mean, Nairobi to them is a foreign land. You know, what's the interest in some other corner? So one of the, even now, as we speak, do you know that the audience for the media is so segmented, even along political lines, that there are some that are not watching some television. So where would we be talking about public interest? We must really begin to think about, because the public interest must begin to speak to certain specifics. See that? If, for example, we begin to support the emerging media in various areas, so that, for example, certain counties that previously have never enjoyed, you know.
In fact, well, it's good to mention counties, because for me, one of the really important things we need to do is to develop county-based media. And I think this is something that counties can do, but it shouldn't be left to the executives within counties,
right?
You know, to the county governments, basically, you know, because basically they're just going to use them as they're doing now as their own PR things.
You see,
know? But we do need media that caters for issues within counties, that's not overwhelmed by what's happening in Nairobi, you know. And unfortunately, the way we are set up now is most of our mainstream press, and that the guys who actually dictate agendas, you know, will come here, you know, they'll turn up on NTV, on KTN, whatever, you know, and that is where that tends to overwhelm the national conversation. We need to think, I think, quite deliberately about how we formulate a strategy to grow county-based media, and I think it should be county-based public media, you know, that's owned by us and that's independent of the executive.
In one, and William has tried it, he will tell you, there is also an issue of orientation. That when they started Turkana Times, you remember, and it was doing very well under KCA and the Turkana Journal, but you also start noticing even the county-based media want to lead a story on Joho, on Yuhu. I mean, they also stuck in the national content, so that then this misses the point of why this was a community or a local media. So that also needs some orientation, because we also start noticing the people who go to manage those community media houses are the people who left Nation, Standard, and they go with the same thinking and start again feeding the whole. You get. I mean, I come from a place where there's Balala FM, and sometimes you see when they localize their news, the viewership and listening is so high. But sometimes they're also struggling to compete with the Nation or Standard or Citizen. They miss it.
No, we ran. You remember the link?
Yes.
You know, we ran a monthly publication. You know, KC and the Institute for you know, Civic Affairs and Development from April 2004 to 2013 December, and it was purely on, you know, the development issues and human rights.
How was the uptake?
No, it ran for many years, and it was the NGO sector, government, you know, some of them, because like we would be having pullouts. If it's on CDF, we would send you know, MPs running back to the constituency to see what's happening, and we are supporting journalists in about 3-4 provinces, you know, then. You know, consistently. The whole idea also is to ensure that the journalists who are producing content that the people want in the ground are also supported.
Yes.
So that we don't have what Victor is talking about, somebody having a fairly astronomical figure of 1-point-something million, and somebody producing the, you know, content down there isn't paid for 4 months. No.
500 shillings per click.
There must be a rationalization of expenditure. So by different media houses in terms of you know.
I want us to agree, because we're going around on this question. At what point, who's the convener of this conversation? Because we obviously understand what is happening in the market currently, and what needs, you know, to sort of be fixed. Then there's the ideal.
Yeah.
Who starts leading that conversation?
No, there's a serious conversation which we are having, and people must sit down. Media investors have a role, media managers have a role, media owners have a role, editors have a role, correspondents have a role, independent content. It's an industry issue. It's no longer about one person, because we have seen where people have sat down, models are working. I mean, you remember New Vision in Uganda, it had gone, it's a publicly owned news, and when they brought in a person, it's making profit right now. You have mentioned a few examples elsewhere. So it's not either me or you, or it's somebody's business. It's an industry that has an issue where people must come together and just look at what are some of the industries. What I've seen, what has happened in Tanzania today, the government has set up a task force,
yes,
to just help and understand what the media industry is going through and what can be. And those are the kind of thinking we are having, that people must just come and see it. It's not no longer your problem, my problem, your problem, an industry problem that must be sorted out. And a number of people have suggestions that can be put in a document and shared.
And for me, I think it's beyond an industry problem. I think it is a whole of society problem. So we've got to approach this the same way we talk about corruption being something that we all need to figure out. You know, it affects everybody. The same way we should be looking at the media. So if you think about what we've done with the Constitution, with protecting the media space, there's a reason why. You know, we understand we all benefit when that's there. You know. So we can't just say that, oh, it's a few guys who own stations who are going to go and sit over there and figure out.
That's why I say it goes beyond one
it's
group.
All of us, and I think it's got to become a public issue, you know, for us to look at, do we need legislation? Do we need to mobilize resource? You know, how do we do it? How do we deal with KBC to make it properly independent and working? How do we deal with county-based media? How do we create that? You know, and we actually have that as a proper, full discussion. You know, from where then we can come up with solutions. The solutions might be,
you know, it has been difficult to discuss. For example, if we are talking about media sustainability, you see, the difficult conversations are the owners of media, the managers of media think differently from say like the journalists or regulators or anybody else. Now, you see now, there are groups of people who think that they know about business. No, that is not true. Even consumers, like, you know, we must properly engage the consumers. And in my opinion, globally, the media will never reach everybody. And that is why I was talking about segmentation. So you'll find that one media house may take a certain segment, others will take other segments, but there could be a general agreement about how this can work. And I quite agree with you in terms of the consultation towards saying, how should the media best serve the interests of the public? And what are the models that can work? People must sit down. This
is a national conversation. Gentlemen, we have been here for an hour, so I need to get final thoughts. Let me start with you, Victor. We will never finish this. I promise that we'll continue having this discussion. Again, if it's not convened elsewhere, I will do the convening.
We are very disappointed.
What's your take home?
We are very disappointed that the industry is going. We are not doing public simply because some people think they know they own the media, they know too much about, and they can't converse with others to help a problem that is facing a whole. So the most urgent thing to me, and there's already goodwill, for example, from some quarters, is that people should immediately convene, and it should not just be.
How do you put impetus to that?
The impetus is the media owners have a chairman, KCA is there, bloggers are there, media councils are there, editors guild, media, other people. I mean, there are sectors. In fact, the Act mentions about 13 sectors, people from the sector. That can be the convening people as they finish the interview with the board members of media council. The next assignment should be those, for example, those institutions that are mentioned in the Act of Media Council can convene a meeting urgently, and they are known by names, so that then we create a mechanism for discussion. Because one of the things I've had, the CS for information and both the PS have said, media industry needs to put the house in order. And so we need some leadership who takes leadership to help bring. How did the colleagues in Tanzania, for example, engage their government for a government to set up a task force to look at the sustainability issues? So we need media owners. There's a chairman. The case here, you know, there are people. It's not that the industry has no people who are not known. They are there. So we are giving them a few days. If they refuse, we will take it up. Because we are seeing a situation. Some of us, journalism is what we did only. We have no intention of moving to other professions. So if we see our industry just going and there's no leadership from the institutions I've mentioned, then other people will take over. But we must engage as soon as possible to look at some of these issues people are raising, so that we salvage the industry.
I'm reminded that as we speak, there is not only firings, but there is an entire media house that's going 5 months without people being paid.
Even 6.
Wow, yeah.
Even 3, there are people who have gone into court. We can name here names, we know them, that have refused to pay for a year. Some editors tell journalists, and I don't know how my guys survive. They come here, don't pay, but they drive big cars. You can imagine, that's an editor.
I think there are, we've got to admit our media is going through, as media everywhere, is going through a tough time. You know, but if we do value what media can do, what media can deliver, then we've got to be willing to actually sit down and put our money where our mouth is. And I'm saying that the public has to be willing to pay for public interest media, you know. And by public, I don't mean individuals, I mean us collectively. You have to be willing to put the resources that then allow the media to do the job that we have. But there is a duty then on the media itself. You know, we give you airwaves, we give you protection in our constitution. We are talking about giving you money. You know, what do we get in return?
Yes.
You know, and I think
that's the conversation we need to have.
We can't keep a situation where media gets all of this, but then the quality that we get back from them is rubbish. So we really need to have it both ways, where we are paying for a properly curated content that we can all be proud of.
William, in a minute or less.
I think certainly we all agree that the media sector has not been very engaged. You know, there's a bit of aloofness and a bit of hostility internally. And if we are talking about these challenges, I think we have no choice. We really must sit down. And you brought it from the whole question of the new regime. The new regime here means that people must also look at things differently. So the media must really, all the different strands of the media, you know, stakeholders, and we must sit down and find a way of discussing this whole, the whole question about the challenges that we, some of them are operational, others, policy and legislative.
Ideological and the rest of it.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
James, I just wonder for a minute, why would the four the print newspapers in Nairobi each have a very huge printing press on Mombasa Road? Each of them doing just, I mean, why? Why can't we come together?
In the digital age.
Why should we be sending sometimes 30 cameras to one function if we can use a feed?
Absolutely. This is a question that we should talk to. Thank you very much. I need to leave now. But before I leave, Professor George Omore Magoha has passed on this evening at the age of 71. He's an accomplished medic, lecturer, and administrator. Roles he played in the public domain, not mincing his words. Of course, his last public assignment as Education CS, Magoha saw the CBC program that has occupied parents and the public alike on what to do with a system that didn't have sufficient public participation. In his earlier role as the Vice Chancellor of the University of Nairobi, the good professor had to contend with the striking students, deal with inefficiencies in the systems, and to many observers, succeeded in returning the university to its lost glory days. It is his public pronouncements, though, then that make Professor Magoha a permanent fixture in Kenya's public mind. For instance, during the pandemic, he famously quipped that children can read under a tree. No need for a special place to contain COVID-19.
Country in the world where new classrooms have been built because of the COVID-19 pandemic. I want to plead with our gallant teachers to ensure that they become innovative. For example, in this school, you can see in between the trees, if the weather is as good as it is now, nothing stops the head teacher, who is an excellent teacher, from having classes outside there, in addition to others being inside the room. Let us be innovative and let us stop criticizing without solution.
Well, his public statements and quite frankly his strong arm dealings with the public officials didn't always go down well. Consider this incident where he was caught on tape dressing down an elderly public official.
Sir, I still have a report. This is what needs to be done. This is being addressed.
You are talking about a report. I'm talking about what is here on
Sir, we have noted. We are acting on it.
Can you get away from this meeting now? When the meeting was
Well, we all agree that there are better ways of handling that situation and saying those things. Professor Magoha was a tough interviewee too. I sat with him in panels such as the one I'm having tonight, and he once showed up in my studio set with volumes of paperwork when we want to discuss the problems at the University of Nairobi, and he told me that, I quote, familiarize yourself with these materials because this is going to form the basis of our conversation tonight. Now the man has gone. The professional deeds and misspeaking, if you like, remains. Condolences are pouring in. His last public outburst was months ago, just before the election, with my colleague Rukia Bule had asked this question. This is the final thing I'm showing you tonight.
The government of the Republic of Kenya, who are you representing? Because if you are representing Al-Shabaab, I'm not answering. Which TV station? NTV. NTV is a good station.
Well, Professor George Omore Magoha, dead at 71. With all due respect, good night. We have to love you and leave you. My name is James Smart. Thank you very much to my panel. Bye.